Have you ever noticed how some people seem quietly unbothered by trends, hype, or the constant noise of the world, yet they carry this deep, almost invisible exhaustion? Like they've seen enough to know what matters, but they're still carrying the weight of everything they had to figure out on their own. If you've ever thought, why do people from that generation seem so skeptical, so self-reliant, and yet oddly nostalgic? Then stay with me, because understanding the psychology of Gen X is like opening a time capsule that explains far more about today's world than we usually admit. Gen X grew up in a strange psychological in-between space. Not old enough to inherit the post-war optimism, not young enough to grow up fully digital. They were raised during a time when institutions started cracking, when trust in systems quietly eroded, and when the message was simple but heavy: don't expect too much help. And that message didn't just shape their careers or politics. It shaped their nervous systems. Imagine being a kid whose parents were often working, distracted, or emotionally unavailable, not because they didn't care, but because the world was shifting fast and survival felt urgent. Many Gen X kids came home to empty houses. They made their own snacks. They learned to solve small crises alone. That kind of independence sounds admirable, and it is, but psychologically, it comes at a cost. When you learn early that no one is coming to rescue you, you also learn not to rely too deeply on anyone. That's why Gen X often comes across as emotionally contained. Not cold. Contained. They feel deeply, but they learn to keep those feelings manageable, private, and under control. Emotional self-regulation wasn't a wellness buzzword back then. It was survival. If you could handle things yourself, you were praised. If you needed too much, you were told to toughen up. This created a generation that values competence over visibility. While other generations might ask, do people see me? Gen X often asks, can I handle this? Their self-worth is closely tied to capability. Fixing things, enduring things, getting through things without making a big deal about it. There's pride in that, but also loneliness. Gen X humor tells you everything you need to know. Dry, sarcastic, slightly dark, often self-deprecating. Humor became a pressure valve. When you can't change the system, you learn to laugh at it. When optimism feels naive, irony feels safe. That's not cynicism for the sake of negativity. It's emotional armor. They also grew up watching authority figures fall from grace. Political scandals, corporate layoffs, broken promises. So Gen X learned early not to romanticize institutions. Loyalty for them is conditional, earned. They don't easily buy into slogans or grand visions. They trust patterns more than promises. Show them consistency, and they'll respect you. Talk too much without substance, and they check out. This skepticism often gets misread as apathy, but psychologically it's discernment. When you've seen cycles repeat, you stop reacting emotionally to every new alarm. You conserve energy. You pick your battles. Gen X learned that burnout doesn't come from caring too little, but from caring about things you can't control. Another defining trait is their relationship with technology. Gen X remembers life before constant connectivity. They adapted to digital tools rather than being shaped by them. This gives them a unique mental flexibility. They can unplug without panic. They remember boredom as a creative space, not a problem to fix. Their brains were trained to sit with silence longer than most. At the same time, they were the first generation to feel the pressure of having it all, without the support systems to make that realistic. Work hard. Be independent. Be a good parent. Don't complain. That internal contradiction creates chronic stress. Gen X often carries fatigue that doesn't look dramatic. It's quiet, functional, persistent. Emotionally, they're pragmatic romantics. They want meaning, but they don't trust fairy tales. They believe in love, but not without effort. In work, in relationships, in life, they tend to think, show me, don't tell me. Their attachment style often reflects this. Loyal once committed, slow to open up, uncomfortable with emotional extremes. Gen X also has a complicated relationship with nostalgia. Not because the past was perfect, but because it felt more stable. The rules were clearer. The pace was slower. Nostalgia becomes a way to reconnect with a version of the world where effort felt more directly rewarded. That doesn't mean they want to go back. It means they're grieving something that quietly disappeared. What's powerful about Gen X psychology is resilience. Not the motivational poster kind. The lived-in kind. The kind that knows how to keep going even when things don't make sense. They learned adaptability before it became a corporate buzzword. They pivoted before pivoting had a name. But resilience without reflection can turn into emotional numbness. Many Gen Xers are only now later in life, giving themselves permission to ask, what did all that independence cost me? Therapy, emotional literacy, self-compassion. These weren't normalized when they were young. So learning them now can feel both liberating and awkward. There's also a strong sense of responsibility toward both older and younger generations. Gen X often feels like the bridge, holding things together quietly, supporting aging parents, helping younger colleagues navigate chaos. They rarely ask for recognition. They just keep showing up. Psychologically, this can lead to feeling invisible, necessary but unseen. And yet, when Gen X speaks, it's often grounded, measured, real. They don't chase validation as loudly, but they value authenticity deeply. They don't need constant applause. They need trust, respect, room to work without micromanagement. If you're Gen X, or you were shaped by Gen X energy, here's the gentle reframe. Your independence isn't emotional distance. It's a skill. Your skepticism isn't bitterness. It's pattern recognition. Your exhaustion isn't weakness. It's the cost of carrying responsibility quietly for decades. And if you're not Gen X, understanding the psychology helps you see why they move the way they do, why they don't overshare, why they don't panic at every change, why they sometimes seem detached but are actually deeply invested in outcomes, not appearances. Every generation adapts to the environment it's born into. Gen X adapted to uncertainty by becoming self-sufficient, observant, and emotionally contained. That adaptation deserves understanding, not stereotypes. So the next time you hear someone dismiss Gen X as disengaged or cynical, remember this. They learned early that the world doesn't pause for feelings. And yet, they kept theirs intact. Just quieter, more guarded, stronger than they look. If any part of this felt familiar, or if it made you see someone in your life differently, sit with that for a moment. Reflection is where understanding turns into empathy. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden psychology behind generations, personalities, and everyday behaviors we all carry, you know what to do next.